Hello, and welcome to the Fresh Air Sci-Fi show. I am Joe.
And I'm Dave.
According to our names right now, I'm Luke and you're Joe.
We'll just go with that.
I'll get rid of them. We know who we are. And if anyone doesn't know who we are by now, well, they'll be confused. Oh, I just killed my camera completely. Yeah, how you doing, buddy?
Yeah, not too bad. A little tired, but...
What's new?
Yep. No, I was up about 8:30 this morning and didn't get a nap. And you know, what with me being an old man.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I typically had one of those nights and mornings myself. It was like...
well, you've got a good excuse. You've got a little pooping machine.
I do. I've got two of them now.
Double the poop, double the fun. I'm just going to quickly test and see if that pops up. Yes, that works nicely. So obviously I've got a new setup, so I'm just trying to get everything set up so it all works nicely. I'm getting the overlays working and all the background stuff, and hopefully everything is going okay. We've got no dropped frames so far. There's a little bit of hollow echoiness to your voice. I think just because the room's so empty.
That is exactly what it is. So I also can't get the mic closer to me at the moment. The only place I could put it sort of was over that side, and I don't know. I mean, if I was talking up here and a little bit quieter, there'd be a lot less echo.
Yeah, that's why I've got to do this.
Yeah.
And plus, you know, it doesn't really pick me up from back here.
That's true. So, yeah, I do realize I need to do something like that. I need to get basically a longer monitor arm because that's as far as that one goes. Although now that I've put this in here, or I could put it in coming in from over there, I don't know. It's playing with the new setup. And I've got a lot of cable management to do. You can't imagine the shitstorm that is everything that's down there.
I can. I'm in a room with two tellies, a laptop, a PC, another laptop, and all kinds of stuff. So, yeah. It's not as bad as the telly downstairs where I've got the Mega Drive Classic, the Mega Drive Mini, the DVD player, the Blu-ray player, the PC. Yeah, it's just a mess.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So good luck to you.
Yeah, I am planning on doing some cable management. Part of the challenge has obviously been, because this is a riser desk, making sure that the cables will fit everything. So at the moment, I've actually got my computer there. What I'd like to do is, get a cage underneath it. But again, that's money I don't have at the moment. We still haven't finished the development on this, and we've sort of run out of all the stuff that we wanted to do for the rest of the property as well. So, some of it's going to be it'll have to do for now, unfortunately. But it's still great. It's nice to have my turntables back. It's nice to have 3 screens again. And have a mix. That one went really wrong, and I've only just realised that the headphones were quite a bit ahead of the actual speaker system. So in here, I've got my old 5.1 system, which I have set to 4.1 when I've got music on, but I was setting the turntables to play through the computer to play out because I haven't got I can't find the cables that I use to plug the turntables directly in, and I thought, well, there's not going to be any latency there. No, it'll be fine. Well, no, clearly there was. So I'm mixing the tunes and everything's going out of tune, and then I get it in time on the headphones, and I take the headphones off, and it's like, oh god, it's really out of time. So that'll just be that mix I'll just cut and delete forever after the live stream is gone.
Just call it a getting back into practice one.
Yeah. But that's okay. At least I now know that that's a problem. I hadn't had a chance to mess with the headphones and the full setup and everything like that. So never mind. I am glad that I chose an easier genre to mix tonight, though. Otherwise, that could have sounded even worse.
Nobody would have noticed.
It's because no one was listening at that point. I think we've been forgotten about, Dave.
That wouldn't surprise me. Nobody listened to us anyway.
No, we've had 3 weeks off, and yeah. Who are those guys?
Longer for me.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, you did do one stream before I went.
Yeah, I made
there,
like
didn't you?
2 appearances in the last 3 months or something.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That's right. You feeling a bit better now that you're done for a few months?
Yeah, I feel much better.
Awesome. Well, hopefully,
I'm tired, but not worn out. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think the general state of being of you's tired, though, isn't it?
Yeah, these days.
I know the feeling too well. Also, I've got some decor to go up. Hopefully, will help with this echoey sound. I don't know if you can see in the background there. That's one of those 5-piece pictures.
The yellow thing?
Yeah. So that's a Dragon Ball Z thing. It's got Goku and Shenron. I've got a couple of other little bits around. Like this to go up.
Cool.
So that'll hopefully take a bit, and I need to get some shelving for this wall here. Then I can finally get my books out of storage, and that'll absorb some of it as well. So, yeah.
I wouldn't know anything about books being out of storage.
Yeah, mine have been in storage for far too long. But yeah, I still don't have time or energy to really do much reading at the moment. It's the few minutes I can grab when I'm on the toilet. I think this is the longest I haven't been in the house or haven't been working. So there you go. So tonight's conversation, I suppose we should really get on with, and it's kind of relevant, I guess. And tonight's stream is called License to Breed. And the reason for this stream, it's a conversation I find quite interesting around things like responsible breeding, the problems that we can arise if we allow the population to keep on going at the exponential rate that it's going. Issues with some of the statements about the population growth as well. For example, on that side, there's actually lots of space on this planet. Part of the problem is the development and the infrastructure that isn't there. It's not that there isn't necessarily space on the planet, and then you end up with high rises going up and up and up and up and up, and that's why you get these massive cities and really poverty-stricken areas. So then there's the question, well, should we slow down breeding until we can get the infrastructure in place and things like that? But I suppose the first thing we should think about, though, is this license to breed, because that was the main topic of conversation. So in this, I was thinking there's plenty of things that are regulated and that you need a license for. You need a driving license, you need a marriage license, you need, depending where you are, a license to own a gun. Fishing license, yeah. And then there's plenty of natural things that are actually regulated as well. And by natural, I mean that has had no sort of real man-madeness about them. Even certain places, you need a license, or it is illegal to collect rainwater, which is absolutely crazy. But
I can't grow weed in my garden.
No, and then another natural thing. Obviously, we could separate the difference between a drug that has gone through a process to turn it into what it is, something like cocaine or speed, that has gone through this chemical process. It's still technically all natural ingredients, but it's a bit different to weed and mushrooms. Although there was the odd thing in England, I think they changed the law because it was actually legal to sell mushrooms in shops if it was still wet, and you could own them if they were still wet. It was only once they were dried out that they became illegal, and this is like,
I've not heard that one.
Really? Well, there used to be a shop down the road. Up in Smoke in Croydon. I say down the road, long way away from where I am now. And they used to sell them there. And you could go mushroom picking, and it would be legal to go mushroom picking. And it wasn't until you dried them out that they were considered a substance that was illegal. But then they changed the law, and the shops were no longer allowed to sell them. And places like Up in Smoke got rid of all of their stock. But yeah, when they suddenly realised that there was this loophole, it was quite a fun sort of few months.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Well, everybody would just go into Up in Smoke and come out with these massive bags of mushrooms. But obviously, I don't actually like the idea of license or regulation on natural things in general. But I can also understand the necessity to. For example, if there was no regulation whatsoever, I mean, I know we can go into a slippery slope, but if someone was allowed to take a ton of mushrooms and then drive to work with their kids in the car, I mean, that wouldn't be a good situation. And you'd like to think people were sensible enough not to do that, but people have time and time again proved that they're not. And so the argument for a license to breed would be along the lines of there are plenty of people who are not in a situation where they can look after children themselves. They can't. It could be financial reasons. It could be addiction reasons, other mental health reasons. There can be a number of reasons why someone isn't at a point in their life where they can breed. Now, sometimes these things happen by accident, and there are people who put all sorts of regulations on these accidents. And there are times when these things are planned, but people do it and they can't afford it. And then there's the additional strain on the government and things like that. And there are even people, and I hate bringing these ones up, there are even people that have kids purely so that they can be this strain on the government. And it does happen. In fact, I know a couple of people who got pregnant when they were young just so that they could literally get a flat, a council flat, and claim benefits and not go to work, and so on and so forth. So it does happen. There are people that abuse the system. Personally, I'm more worried about the 1%ers that abuse the system than the people down the other end. But these are all arguments that could be made for the license to breed. I personally think, though, that I'd rather an option where not necessarily a license as such, but all men are given some sort of implanted vasectomy at birth. And when they are at a point where they're ready to have kids, they apply to get this reversed. Now, there are obvious problems. It's an invasion on the body at a young age, but these sorts of things happen all the time. Things like circumcision are seen as perfectly acceptable. We expect women to be on the pill all the time. And so on and so forth. So, I mean, Dave, I'm talking a lot. Do you want to jump in here?
Well, before I do, I don't know if it's just my end, but there's loads of static in your voice.
Lots of static. Is that coming through? Brina is... hello. How are you doing, Brina? Nice to have you here. Is this static coming through that end as well? please let me know. I hope that that's not going to ruin everything, and it's just a Discord thing. I have been having Discord issues recently. I'm actually considering changing what we record in because it started. It's just problems. Apparently, it's coming through okay. We've actually got some comments from Brina saying,
yeah, some good ones.
Yeah. So let's bring these up. So while I understand it's an idea, I think having a license to breed would be ultimately interfering with bodily autonomy. I mean, that's a good point in itself. We could say the same about the suggestion I made with the imposed vasectomies as well. But aren't there these impositions in plenty of places as well? You consider there are many people who... What's the term? For example, some of the southern states in America where it's either been made illegal to get an abortion, or you've got the 6 weeks, law, which is generally when you find out that you're pregnant anyway. So you're a bit buggered by that point. And could we make arguments that, well, having a license to drive a car is interfering with your bodily autonomy, or the fact that some people like to take drugs and they can be completely safe in their own home and they're being told that it's illegal and they can go to prison for doing that. So isn't that some form of imposition on the bodily autonomy too, Dave?
I would think that there's a sort of symmetry there between abortion and having to kind of get a license to have a kid. If it's the woman's right to choose, then it's the woman's right to choose both sides.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. I think that is a big part of it. But then could we say that if someone has made this choice to have a kid, then they should be in a situation where they are able to afford that kid?
Yeah. I sort of agree with that, because there is a lot of, like, I've grown up on council estates, and you know what I mean. I've seen some of the worst. But again, at the same time, it's you're telling a woman what she can do and can't do with her womb.
Well, I mean, you're not telling her she can't have the kid. You're just saying that if you have the kid, you should be able to support it.
Yeah, but if you then say, well, I don't think you can support it,
you're then, yeah.
So you can't have the kid.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Although I wouldn't necessarily say you can't have it because you can't support it. I'd almost say that there are genuinely people who have gone through breakups and things like that, or for whatever reason, genuinely need that support of the council and the government, and they deserve that. I'm not saying that a life situation throwing you a curveball shouldn't mean it. I'm just talking about those situations where someone is intentionally, having that child for that reason. And perhaps you couldn't prove it on the first one. Perhaps it's an accident, but they don't want to have an abortion or something like that. That could happen. But then if it happens again, are you at that point?
Well, I mean, there's a few things to raise here. Is what counts as being able to support the child? I mean, you could have all the money in the world, but not have the emotional support.
Mm-hmm.
So would that count as not being able to support the child? You can afford to have the kid and pass it off to a nanny for 12 hours a day. So would that count as supporting the child?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of layers to it. I'm just approaching things at the moment from a financial aspect, though I did speak earlier about, there could be other reasons that you're not in a position to have a child, be it through addiction or mental illness or something like that. And I think, being emotionally unavailable or, being a sociopath or something like that, there is There's no real way to necessarily prove that first, is there? Really, you don't know, and some people don't know what they. Well, in fact, nobody knows what sort of parent they're going to be like. They might have ideas, but no one knows really until you are a parent.
Well, another thing to bring up here would be something like, imagine the couple got pregnant. And they passed all the things that would have allowed them to have the child. They're allowed to have this license to breed. And 2 months before it's due, one of them loses the job. They can't afford it. They get evicted. Are they then told that they have to have an abortion?
No, because that's a curveball.
Or give the kid up. Yeah.
Again, no, that's a curveball because that's one of these things. Life can do it. And I did mention that you know, I'm not talking about the situations where shit happens and you need support. Shit can happen to anyone, and I don't think people should be denied support when shit has happened. But if they lost their job because they thought, haha, we've passed all the checks, now let's go and throw shit at our employers, get fired, and we can live off of benefits, that's a different situation for going through whatever happens and they lose their job, you know, through redundancy or any other means. So I think that yeah, it's a very, very complex situation, and I think that's probably why it's not really done. I think it's almost too hard work, and it's to do up front, and I think that's generally why. And there's probably less money spent out in... I think
another aspect comes down to freedom. Like, there are certain natural rights that we all believe that we have, like the right to safety, the right to our pursuit of happiness. I mean, you can go down the route of are rights something that are natural, or are they given to us by the government? In my opinion, there's kind of a mix of both. There's like a platonic set of rights that exist out there that we should be aiming for, and that everybody is kind of naturally endowed with, like the human rights. But I think when you're talking about, you know, people having the kid just so that they can get the flat, they can get the child credit, they can get the child allowance, all that kind of stuff, I think a better solution would be something like a more robust welfare system. Because then people wouldn't be put into this situation where they feel the need to do this thing and have this child that may or may not necessarily be wanted, or they may or may not be able to take care of, so that they can have these things, find some way of figuring out how to give them these things without having to go through that process.
Actually, on that front, I'm a big fan of the idea of a universal living wage.
I am, yeah.
I've been thinking about. I actually want to write an article on it at some point when I've got the time to do as much research as I think is needed for something like this. But as a basic idea, you know, you get your basic living wage. You know, if you want to, you don't have to work, right? You get just as standard enough to support yourself for your house, your groceries, as long as you're sensible, to have TV and internet and things like that. Not necessarily the gigafast connection, but enough so that you can, you know, watch Netflix. And even, you know, a week's holiday in a year, you know. Nothing too lavish, but enough to live an okay life. And I think this would change the working environment as well, because jobs would then have to be attractive for employees, because people could actually just go, well, fuck it, I ain't going to work then. You know, but people will work to get above this basic wage that everybody gets, and so that they can have a really good life for themselves. But it means that no one is ever without. And you're right, this sort of thing would then probably prevent them having a kid just for that point, because we could say, well, the living wage for a kid doesn't kick in until X point. So if you want to be able to afford a kid, then yeah, you know, have a job so that you can then have your maternity pay, so on and so forth.
Yeah. I think that would be a much better solution. I mean, I can totally understand the whole wanting to make sure people are fit parents before they have a child. Like I can really relate to that. But I think that it's one of the things that's so hard to police. If you think of China during the one-child policy, there were forced abortions. There were baby girls who died in accidents because they wanted a male. And now, 50 years on, they've got this problem where there's not enough females to keep the population going quite so strongly, and the old people can't be supported. There's a very fine ecosystem balance that needs to go on there.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was personified in. I didn't watch it to the end, but the TV series The 100. They were only allowed one child each.
Yeah, I didn't watch that one.
I thought it was a good start. It was a little bit teen drama, but it definitely had the beginnings of something good and some good content to it. So Brina has another question. She says, in theory, how would we prevent people from getting pregnant and staying pregnant? So, I mean, one of the things that I do think it would be good, and obviously, again, I did mention this as an invasion on bodily autonomy, but I think the men should have some form of a vasectomy at birth, and basically they cannot get a woman pregnant until they are ready to have the kid. And I think whether we have the additional requirements like the man has to have a job or I don't know. But I think even if it was just a case of, right, no, I'm now ready for a kid, let's do it. It would prevent women constantly having to be on hormones all the time that really mess up with their systems. There are plenty of risks from being on the pill. I think it's one of the things that came out that I was surprised about and didn't know about. 1 in 10,000 chance of having a blood clot, which was way, way, way higher than the COVID vaccination.
Emma's got to go for regular checks.
Oh, really? Blimey. So, yeah, there's a lot of things there. I think that is one solution. I don't know if it's one that people would necessarily be happy with. But I think that's a much better situation than the one we've currently got. Is it the best one? I don't know. In regards to staying pregnant, I don't know what you mean there. I mean...
Well, what would be the punishment if somebody managed to get pregnant and they didn't have the license? What would happen to the continuing pregnancy?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously going with the whole license thing that I think we've pretty much agreed isn't actually a good idea, even though you can see why there are arguments for it. Yeah, I would never. I would never force an abortion or anything like that. In the same way, I would never let someone choose. I'm very, very pro-choice. So whether they want one or not, I think is.
Well, that's what happened in China was forced abortions. So, I think one other a slightly better way to approach it would be something like good parenting classes for kids in school. I know we're a bit late with most of the later generation, but if it was implemented in schools, or just being more responsible citizens, or how to be more responsible when living within a social structure type thing.
I mean, this comes back to something we said. We could say it could be part of the ethics class. I mean, the pair of us are quite big fans of ethics being taught from a young age in schools, obviously getting a bit deeper as you get older, along with critical thinking lessons and things like that. So from there, part of the ethics, you could have the ethics of parenting and the ethics of living within a society.
Yeah, and I think they're important. When I was growing up in Canada, there were social studies classes. I think that's what they called them, and they were something very similar to that, like voting, why it's like such a big responsibility to vote within your country, why it's good to look after your neighborhood, and like why it's good to be sort of virtuous, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So something like that, like a social class.
Yeah, I think that's definitely needed. It needs to be done well, though, because I don't know whether it was when I was living in America for that year, or if it was one of the classes that I had to take when I came back. No, I think it was when I lived in America for a year, but it was just a DOS class where nobody paid attention to anything and nothing of substance actually came out. So, yeah. Going through the other questions. Oh, sorry, Brina. I am trying to catch up with the chat. I've been a bit lax. It's been a while. I'm out of practice with this, man. So Brina says, I do actually get your point. My concern is with pregnancy, the only way to prevent it would be to force medications that would prevent it. And, well, yeah, or like, some form of forced vasectomy, at a young age. Oddly, I have less of an issue with that than I do with a circumcision for non-medical reasons. Like the fact that this is seen as a norm. Yet I'm essentially saying insert a foreign body into or do a minor operation on a child that technically isn't necessary. It's preventing something natural. So I realize there's a conflict there, but I resolve the conflict with the fact that what does the circumcision actually do? What does that benefit? Not really anything unless there's a medical reason. And if we flip it over to the other side, what could the benefits be of this childhood vasectomy? Well, there's quite a lot of benefits. It stops a lot of unwanted pregnancies. It stops women from having to be on medication their entire lives. So I don't think they're exactly equal, but there is still this invasion, this non-consensual thing that's going on. And I don't know how to fully resolve that in my mind right now, other than with the justifications I've just given.
Yeah, and I think if we're going to pump drugs into like our water system or something, forget the birth control. Let's go with mushrooms and MDMA.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. See, make me prime minister. I'll make everybody happy.
Yeah, whether they want to be happy or not.
Yeah.
So another comment says, I also think we'd do well to have more research done to have better birth control avenues for cis men other than condoms and vasectomies. Yes, I mean, this just shows how pathetic that we men are, though. There was the male pill, and we basically rejected it because it didn't make us feel good. And it was like, really? Really? Do you know how... Sorry, go
there's a bit of social identity that goes on there where a man is worth as a man and his manhood is judged by the kind of children he can have and how many children he can have and his testosterone levels. So there's all that to overcome with regards to how men are looked at within societies.
Yeah, I can't really think of any others off the top of my head, though. I mean, you have your mechanical, as in the operation. You have your chemical, and as you say, Brina, you've got the condom, which, all in all, none of them are particularly great options, are they?
Stick men in chastity belts till they're 25.
Yeah. No men should have sex till they're 25.
No. I didn't. honest.
J7B second. Hey, thank you. We may be forced into this in a not too distant dystopian future. The planet can't sustain unlimited growth. You're absolutely right there. It can't sustain unlimited growth. I do think that there is a lot of fear-mongering that goes on about the state of things right now, because there's a lot of space on this planet. Some of it isn't as habitable as others. Some of it is. The problem is the infrastructure's not there, more than anything. But then you also look at how much food waste there is. There's definitely enough food being produced for people. It's just where would they go? And if we do get forced into this, well, I can see it happening. You could end up with something like Brave New World, where people do not give birth. They're cloned as when they're
test
needed.
Tube. Yeah.
And people are basically sterilized at birth. Although there are the odd accidents that happen, but yeah, in general, people are sterilized and no one can have children there, and they're grown. Yeah, as you say, they're all test tube babies. It's interesting, that society as well. It seems, from when you first start reading it, quite idyllic, the way it goes about. It does seem like a much better way to live. But then you realize that there's this almost forced caste system that everybody's thrown into, and how regimented everything is, and how people aren't allowed to think outside the box at all. And you go, actually, no, I understand why there's this big resistance, except there isn't, because people are so conditioned within it. And the second someone starts stepping out the line...
And drugged up.
Yes, with something that's not too different to heroin.
Yeah, mixed with MDMA as well. Because it's a sort of numbing but happy type pill. It's like Valium with uppers.
Yeah. Only way to fly, man. Brina, this is a comment on the universal credit, saying a UBI in America would so completely change the work environment in favor of the workers and save so many of us from the sting of poverty. Yeah, I think especially in America, because your employment law really, really, really looks after the businesses. Things have changed a lot over here, but even when I was younger, the employment law was better than it is over there. I think many places you only get like a week's holiday in a year. You don't get sick pay. If you're off sick for a week, you might get fired because they've hired someone else who's desperate for a job in that time. It's absolutely crazy, some of the stories I hear coming out of America, and added to the fact that you don't have universal health care as well. And how important it is to find a job that can pay for insurance. And even then, when you have insurance, you're still lumped with these massive bills sometimes. I mean, you think about how much it costs us to have a baby over here. It doesn't. Yet in America, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 for your to have the baby. I mean, even being taken in an ambulance costs $500 to the hospital. You've had an accident, you get taken $500 before they've even done anything. I mean, it's absolutely insane. Absolutely. Brina, you raise a point. Yeah, there are some people that can't be on birth control at all. It does affect it affects the hormones, so it can cause things like depression and anxiety and all of that to get so much worse. It can make some people incredibly ill. Some people, though, it can level out as well. Some people have a hormone imbalance, and the hormones actually make them function better. But then we are a mixed up jumble of chemicals, and sometimes putting some chemicals in works, and sometimes it doesn't. So there has to be
better options than that. And I know there are for women other options as well, such as the coil and things like that. But again, it's having something inserted inside yourself, a foreign body, and why should women be the ones expected to do that?
I think there's still a sort of ancient way of looking at things where women are in charge of the children, so that's why it's kind of left to them.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's terrible though, isn't it? Because it's on the woman. Okay, fair enough. It's it's as soon as she's pregnant, it's on the woman, and it is right. It's your body it's in. Yet, men who don't do anything to help then say, well, no, you can't now do what you want with your body, and they try and impose their will through abortion laws and things like that. It's absolutely crazy. It's your problem. No, yeah, I'm pretty much done anyway.
I was just going to say that kind of goes back to what I was saying, where the test of a man's manhood, or the concept of manhood, goes back to how having children, how strong they are, how tough they are, how many he has. And that's why there's the stupid kind of outlook where if a woman has 4 kids from 4 different men, she's seen as something terrible. But the fathers who've abandoned those kids are seen as great because they've had children with loads of different women. And that's, yeah.
What? What?
Well, there's that stupid saying, a key that can open any lock is great, but a lock that can be opened by any key is a bad lock, or something like that. I don't know. It's some terrible misogynistic line that I hear every now and again.
I've never heard that one, but, you know, if it wasn't for the euphemism, I can understand, you know, the lock part. You don't want a lock that's easy to open. I used to have a padlock that I could just pick up any object and do that. But I know that's not what it's actually getting at. I know it's being metaphorical. Hi, Rev. Nice to see you. His suggestion is to sterilize Oklahoma. I've never been there, so all I really know is that song that I will do you all a favor and not sing. Josiah, how you doing as well? So let's have a look at your comment. What do you think of Aaron's no need to believe in evolution line from that latest video of his? I don't watch Aaron's videos really, unless someone sends it to me. If that was the one you sent me the other day, I've just remembered that you've sent it to me and I'd forgotten. I don't know specifically what he's saying there. Let's be charitable. There is no need to believe in evolution because it is something that happens regardless of whether you believe in it or not. However, I think his being most likely anyway epistemically vapid and is saying something like you don't need to believe because you know, which is
I don't believe in evolution, I accept it as a fact.
Yeah,
that's what he'll be saying,
which we've if that's the case, Josiah, then I've actually done an entire article about it and had plenty of conversations on Twitter recently about it as well. And if that is the case, I will drop that link onto the video just so people can actually read and hopefully get a slightly better understanding. This fear around the word belief is ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. And when you see people try and justify it, sometimes they end up going back on themselves and arguing against themselves, but then still going, yeah, but you see, they're different. Okay.
Well, that's sort of what my script, or the next video I'm doing, touches on.
Oh, brilliant.
Not that exact thing, but about echo chambers and bad sayings that go around. And
looking forward to that, actually.
I think it's going to annoy a bunch of atheists just from the title.
We do seem to piss off our own more often than not, don't we?
got to shake the trees up to get the fruit out.
We do. I do notice nearly every time we post a new article or a new video or anything like that, I lose followers instantly on Twitter and Facebook. It's brilliant to watch. You just, oh my god, he's not saying we're so brilliant.
How can they be brilliant when I'm the brilliant one and I have pieces of paper to prove it?
Yeah, but it's censored, Dave.
Yeah, that's because I don't want anyone saying that it says fail on it.
Brilliant. Carrying on, just trying to yes, God the Scummer, thank you so much for saying congrats on 300. Yeah, we don't even know how that happened. Apparently, not streaming for 3 weeks increases engagement. So, I mean,
as does Brina shouting us out, and thank you very much for that, Brina. That was really appreciated.
Yeah, very much appreciated, and a good video you did on that as well. Actually, really enjoyed watching that, and enjoyed the little snippet from Luke as well. So yeah, thank you. Just catching up. Oh, okay, yeah, just yeah, that was it. Yeah, predictable. And Rev says it's okay to piss off the atheist. Yeah. It is. I mean, to be honest, I'm not looking to have an echo chamber. There's plenty of people that I disagree with in the right way. There's actually a creationist that I spend a lot of time talking to in DMs on Twitter more than anything else. And I have much better conversations with him than I do with a lot of the atheists on Twitter. Even though, like, it's quite a big difference in our belief. It's not the same as, a liberal Christian that accepts evolution and all that sort of stuff. It's young Earth creationist, thinks the world's 6,000 years old. But actually, when we don't talk about that stuff and we talk about things that we see, sometimes we see our own tribes doing, sometimes we see each other's, we're actually on the same page with a lot of things. And even when we disagree, it's done respectfully. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's good to have a healthy disagreement. This whole attitude of, if you don't accept what Aaron Ra says, then you're not a real atheist, and all of that sort of thing. That's the stuff that pisses me off. And yeah, if that's really going to, if me pointing out people like Aaron Ra's bad epistemology is going to get you to unfollow me, then it's no real loss. As God the Scummer says, we only upset certain dogmatic atheists who haven't got past watching the ACA shows. Yeah, that's very much the case. And I think, unfortunately, that's the bulk of the loud atheists on social media. In the same way that I've pointed out before, like the loud vegans are the ones that are the holier than thou and tell you what to eat and will go and do protest marches and throw blood over people, but actually the average vegan's not like that at all. It's only the bad ones. And I think that's sort of what the atheists are on social media in general. They're a bad representation of what the rest of us are like. Although to them, we're the bad representation of atheists, so, maybe it's all subjective, man.
We're just trying to help them with the critical thinking. And one of the first things you learn when critical thinking is to question where all the source of all the sources of your information came from, and check whether you're just blindly accepting things because it's your own team.
Exactly. There's far too much of that goes on. So far too much. Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, Rev. They've been raised by memes. Oh, Streamlabs Sorry, I need to turn that off. There's a caps thing that I really don't care about people coming in and speaking in caps, not when it's occasional. I set it up so that if it was what I thought it would be if someone uses more than 50% caps in an entire conversation, it will warn them, but it's per message. So I keep saying I need to turn it off, but by the time I'm done streaming, I don't think about it. Sorry.
You've got 2 pooping machines to worry about. That's, yeah.
Yeah. Although I tell you what, I've really lost where we were in the flow. We've discussed. We were discussing Brave New World and a different way that the situation could be done. I think. Well, no, Rev, you're right. It could be an 80 tits because, you know, it doesn't hold beliefs. So it lacks beliefs in... So, I mean, so far we've covered off the license to breed, which obviously... we don't think is necessarily a good thing. In fact, not even necessarily. It's not a good idea. We understand some of the arguments for why you might want a license to breed, and it would help certain issues, but actually it's the equivalent of putting a Band-Aid over the problem. It's not going to be as good as actually putting in some things like a universal wage to help prevent any sort of scams like that. There wouldn't need to be the whole welfare system the way it is in that regard, because everybody would have it. We have discussed certain things like better birth control for men. We've discussed whether men should have a forced vasectomy at birth, and because it is reversible. And it's an idea. An idea that I'd probably say is better than expecting women to be on chemicals their entire lives, but I still don't think it's a great idea. But then when all you have is shit ideas, is the best of a bad idea the one to go for? I don't know. And then obviously, yeah, we broached talking about Brave New World and things like that. So, and also the whole abortion thing, we're both very pro-choice in that regard. So it should follow that people should be able to choose to have their own baby when they want. It's just, should the state be expected to support them if they've chosen to do it at a time where they're not financially affluent, should I say? So, yeah, there were a couple of other bits. Sorry, Dave, did you have anything?
I was just going to say it's one of those really complicated situations that it's a good sort of interdisciplinary question because it's to do with social sciences, psychology, philosophy, law. It's a great topic. Though I mean, it's one that will always come out with no, people shouldn't have licenses to breed. But there are elements within that discussion that could lead to us solving other problems in society.
Yeah, definitely. Like was brought up with the universal wage and things like that. Of course, there'll be a big resistance to the whole universal wage because people will say, yeah, well, they'll just be people.
Goddamn capitalists.
Yeah, and libertarians. And libertarian capitalists.
Yeah. Well, I think that's where the change should begin, though, in structural and conceptual changes within society itself that need to start happening first.
Yeah. And that has to happen at a young age. It has to happen through schools, and we need people taught ethics and critical thinking, and, you know, we can circle around about the things that we think need to be done. But how do we affect that change? That's where I'm at a loss. How do we actually get it? Because actually, it's probably better for the government to keep people who and not so ethical and don't think so critically. I mean, shit.
It's also slightly better to keep a bit of an overpopulation and to keep people in a bit of poverty to ensure that wage growth stagnates and stays down, and people are fighting for jobs, and people are eager to do anything that allows them to survive.
Yeah, even though, I mean, it's been shown that raising the minimum wage doesn't actually hamper the economy in general. I was reading about these economists that won the Nobel Prize, and they did as good as they can sort of life sort of studies where there were these two states next to each other. Oh, this is one of their studies. Two states next to each other where they essentially had the same economy. One raised the minimum wage and one didn't. And it was just chance that they could actually study it like this. And the one with the better economy was the one which had the minimum wage, because people had more money, so people spent more money, and therefore they were better off. And okay, yeah, there's the other argument. Yeah, well, then prices will go up and da, da, da. Okay, well, stop being such wankers and raising your prices every time someone's wage goes up.
Yeah. Take a hit on the profit, then prices won't have to rise so much.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's another thing that could be brought up here about that. Remember when I was discussing rationality and stuff, talking about performance errors? If people were content, people were happy, people were less tired, there'd be less performance errors at work. So it would do them better to be happy.
No, I definitely agree with that. One thing I've noticed is slightly ties in with the current company that I work for. They're very flexible. They're really, really, really good to their staff. They're really understanding. I've worked places that were crap, and I've had bosses that bullied and got really fucked off when you're ill and all of that sort of stuff. And whereas this one's sort of like, oh no, if you need some extra time, have it off and da 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 da. And because they're so good to you, and because they give you a chance to feel good, you work harder naturally because you don't want to lose the freedom. And they are really, really good to the staff. And I sometimes end up doing like a 12-hour day, just because I want to get this bit of work done, and I want to get it done well, and I want to check it and check it and check it and check it and check it. Whereas when I've worked for other companies, I haven't felt so inclined to do it. And then the flip side is, I know with this company, if I then go, well, I did an extra 6 hours yesterday, I'm going to take off 3 today and 3 tomorrow, as long as I don't have any work done and everything, I'm caught up. They don't even, they're going to be okay with that. As long as you've done your hours, it doesn't matter when you do them. Yeah, they're just brilliant. And I think the more this sort of thing comes in and becomes the ethos of companies. I mean, have you seen the whole thing on the 4-day working week?
No.
So,
I've read a lot of stuff on it, but I don't know anything recent.
So they are thinking of trialing it in certain places over here, although most of the places they're doing it over here, they're still saying you have to have your full week and you can do it in 4 days. But the idea is actually you just lose that 7-hour day. You actually just do 4 days and still get paid the same that you would for 5. And they found that in general, productivity has gone up. People are getting that work that they struggle to do in 5 days done easily in 4 days. Not everything, not all the time. There are some people who go, okay, well, I'll do those hours over 5 days because it helps them with the kids. They no longer have to pay for someone to pick up and drop off their kids. They can drop them off themselves. And again, the whole work-life balance thing. And it all just ties into a much, much better working environment. And these sorts of things are what we need to think about on a societal level as well. Not just the working environment, but the way we live. And I think if people are happier, they'll be better. And,
Yeah, I agree. I mean, our social structures have changed a lot over the last 30 years. We've got to a point where everything is like moving along at a rapid rate. But yet our ideas about how society should function aren't changing. I mean, look at the hell that COVID caused.
Yeah.
like moving everything to home. And now they want to, even though things have been quite successful with a lot of people working from home, they now want them to start commuting back to the office.
Yeah. Yeah,
Whereas we really need to start thinking about the structure of how we live, and which sort of ties into some of the things that you were mentioning earlier. People having children to do this, that. But the structure of our society and the way it functions has changed. Communications have expanded in such a way that we don't necessarily need this face-to-face contact. It's good for a lot of people because they're social beings. But we really need to start thinking about changing how societies work.
The other side as well. I mean, a lot of companies go on about inclusion and diversity, and I think one of the things that we've realised through COVID is there are plenty of people who are actually more comfortable and do better work at home. And there are some people that it caused a lot of anxiety to. And these people, so you'd probably say that the people who were more comfortable at home were introverts, and the people who were more comfortable at work were extroverts. And it was sort of the first time extroverts were starting to feel what introverts feel when they're put in the opposite situation. And I still don't think that that's been explained to people. But there is a lot there to be said there that some people do find. I mean, I'm definitely one of them. I definitely prefer it. I also like the fact that I'm having a lot less meetings. And when they are meetings, they're smaller, tighter meetings that discuss the thing, and I get to it. I always found going into a meeting room quite difficult. There was too much going on around me. Plus the temperature in there with the sensory overload, plus the temperature, because there's so many bodies in this meeting room, I'd nearly always fall asleep. So there you go. That's the cure for insomnia for you. Just put me in a room with a load of bodies and talk about work.
Well, another bonus point to all that is, and this sort of relates with kids again, but in the old days, thinking back to like the 60s, 70s, even to some extent up to about the mid-80s, a family could survive on, say, the dad going to work, the mom staying at home. But these days, both people have to go out to work. And there's this complaint from a lot of like conservatives saying, well, the family unit is being destroyed, but they're blaming like skepticism and atheism and liberalism and things like that. When really it's the fact that there's two people out at work all the time. Kids don't have the familial bonding. Whereas allowing people to work from home, some of those people working from home might find it better because they're in contact with the kids. They're having time with the kids. Even though it's not proper time, they're still there with them.
Well, yeah, you still see them when you're going for a cup of tea or whatever.
Yeah. It's a way of keeping familial bonding going.
Yeah, no, I've been very lucky. It's one of the things that I've experienced through this. I mean, we went into lockdown 2 months after Ivy was born, and we actually, because everybody was all up in the air, we had a period of time where we didn't actually have that much work on as well, which was quite nice because it meant that, I'd have my laptop on and I'd be looking for work and I'd be doing a bit of studying, but it meant that I had even more attention to help out with Ivy and interact with her. And at lunch, we'd go for a walk. We'd do like a 5 or 7K walk around the lakes. And, she's grown up having both parents at home. Even though, yes, I'd go off to the office and I'd be locked away for a big part of it, she could come in and say hello and all that sort of thing. Although she's very loud now, so it's a benefit of having this office. It was getting to the point where I'd be in the middle of a meeting and she'd come in screaming. Not for any negative reason, just because that's her standard level of volume. So
just checking a few more comments before we move on to the next section. Godless Scummer says, I love Aaron and he's awesome talking about evolution or phylogeny, but he really needs to stay in his lane and stick to that. His takes on philosophy and history are fucking awful and embarrassing. And I 100% agree with you there. And
yeah.
It's frustrating that he does it and he uses philosophical terms and sometimes he even says, well, I don't know philosophy. It's like, okay, but you're using a philosophical term, so this is how it's done. If someone was using a scientific term incorrectly and saying evolution is a changing kind, would you not correct them? Cool. So, same back at you. This is a philosophical term. No, it's not. Okay, then evolution is a scientific term. Well, it is. Okay. Do you not see what's going on here, Aaron? No, it is a shame because I lost a lot of respect for him from conversations that I had with him, just because he is so entrenched in some of his views, and he always goes on about evidence will change his mind and he's a critical thinker and stuff like that. But when it comes to these sorts of things, he doesn't seem to demonstrate it, which is such a shame.
If he said evolution, I don't believe in evolution, I accept it as a fact, and he's neither a critical thinker or someone who will allow evidence to change his mind.
Yeah. Brina says, the online atheists are exceedingly arrogant in their self-perceived righteousness. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Been there, you know, especially when I first got into debating online, and I found I seem to be around a lot of the worst kind of theists. Now, I've said, you know, some of the theists I talk to are some of the best conversations I have and are much better than the atheists. But I think when I first got into debating online, I was surrounded by the worst theists, the most irrational theists, those that couldn't justify anything, that their best arguments were, you know, well, God exists because I define God something that exists, and
look at the trees.
Yeah, all that crap, and that it did build a bit of arrogance in me. I did feel superior to them, and I was a complete prick about it, if I'm honest. And so I have an understanding, you know, I can explain why there are atheists out there that behave this way, but that doesn't excuse it, because they haven't corrected that behavior. And when you point out to them that there are other types of theists, they just deny it. There was that guy who defeated the Bible, and it's like, well, only in the literalist sense, because, you know, no, because this didn't happen. Okay, but that's generally seen as a metaphor. Well, it doesn't matter, it didn't happen. Okay, but if it's a metaphor, then it doesn't have to have actually literally happened, because it is a metaphor. No way, Christianity's false because this never happened. I can think of plenty of other better arguments as to why I believe Christianity is false, rather than attacking a literalist view of the Bible. But, you know, sorry.
I mean, there's something to be said for people who go after the low-hanging fruit, because there's a lot of them, and, you know, they go rotten if left on the ground.
Yeah.
But to then correlate that to all theists being low-hanging fruit, or never focusing on some of the stronger arguments, is a bit of a failure.
Yeah, most definitely. What's Rev saying? Brave New World. I've seen where people have credited the invention of agnosticism to A. Huxley. I have as well, actually.
I saw that recently.
Really?
And I can't remember who it was.
Yeah, no, I have.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Yes, there is.
I think it was an actual religious person that said it.
Oh, really? Yeah, no, there's
Yeah, but I can't remember who it is.
Between Aldous Huxley and Thomas Huxley.
I mean, they were related, but not the same person.
Yeah,
another shout out to you, Brina. God the Scummer says he loves your channel, and Dave agrees. We've already said that though. And God the Scummer says, yes, there's a lot of truth in the old adage that a happy worker is a busy worker. So that's on the earlier thing that we were saying. And yeah, in that they're productive. You're more productive if you're in a good mood. And I definitely think that's true. And if you also have respect for your work environment, and the people that employ you, and it's not just a general happiness. I mean, that will help you work it, but if you're actually happy with your surroundings and the ethics of the company and everything like that, you are even more driven to work well. And yes, you're right. It's only a valid argument from a biblical literalist point of view. Yeah, but the person I was talking to in that sense would not accept that it was only a good argument against a literalist. And that was the problem. It was just like, what? So, Dave, one of the... We wanted to have a conversation about a couple of related topics, and it was along the lines of designer babies and antinatalism.
Yeah. I mean, antinatalism sort of follows from the previous conversation in that it's the idea that is it moral to have children? And some of the arguments are that, I'll just go into it briefly here, but the arguments are basically that life is generally suffering. So if you have a child, you're bringing this child into a world of suffering. Now, if causing suffering is immoral, then having a child is immoral.
Yes. Although you could easily turn that on its head and say that you can get a lot of pleasure out of having a life.
But it's on balance. If there's more suffering than there is happiness, then... But Sorry, go ahead.
So then that sort of ties into... that maybe the area you live and back into your financial situation, your mental state and all of that. It could be that it's moral for some people under this antinatalism. It could actually be moral for some people because people in this particular line or this area will generally have more good. Or are you saying you have to take the world on balance?
It's a bit of both.
Right.
But mostly, even if you just focus on a single child's life, for most children, they're unhappy. They're also happy. Where is the balance? What is the line? If there's more suffering than happiness, is it right to bring that child into the world? And this can go back to the overpopulation problem, or if we're getting to a point now where we're pushing the planet where we're causing climate change and we're causing problems with our environments, and there's high unemployment, high drug addiction, we're bringing a child into that world who might contribute more to that problem and might make the world a worse place. But on the other hand, there are parents that could bring children into the world and give them all the happiness in the world.
It's a tough one, isn't it? Because then
you
still don't even know. I mean, you could have someone go into a family in an area that you expect to be the worst family and have the most sufferable life ever, and they actually end up having the best life because even though these parents couldn't provide in the ways you expected them to, they were incredibly supportive when they actually became parents and they turned their lives around, and this particular person ended up having a fantastic life and an amazing journey. It seems like there's too many unknowns to really
That's one of the arguments. It's, how can you know? You might have all the best intentions of the world and life hits you in such a way that it ends up causing more suffering. Or you might think that if you bring a child into the world, it's going to suffer and you end up winning the lottery.
Yeah.
And another question is joy or happiness and suffering symmetrical? Like, is one the same in balance as the other? If a child suffers for a day, but then the next day gets immeasurable happiness, is the happiness more valuable than the suffering?
Well, the other side there is kids are incredibly fickle and incredibly emotional as well. So, I mean, they can feel hard done by because you told them they weren't allowed to electrocute themselves. And they can have a paddy over that sort of thing. And they can be in a right mood about it and scream. And one of the funnier ones when Ivy was younger was I told her she wasn't allowed to put yogurt on her knees. And she cried for 10 minutes. She's generally...
Would she have been happier if she put the yogurt on her knees?
Well, she'd have looked at it, she'd have rubbed it into her knees, and she probably... Well, she wouldn't have been unhappy. She'd have been in the same state that she is. But she is generally a happy kid. Yeah. So
yeah, it's one of those arguments that you sort of lean more towards that it's not particularly immoral to have a child. It's what follows where the morality and immorality comes in.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose we do use moral theories to try and predict how we should act. So I can...
Well, that's what antinatalism is. Yeah, it's using a moral theory to predict whether we should have children or not.
But then that doesn't necessarily mean that the result is that moral result. So, and if you don't let the thing happen, then it never has the chance to. I mean, it doesn't seem like a good idea to me. There are definitely some people who I would probably say should never have children.
Yeah. I mean, there is an argument that by taking the antinatalist stance, you're depriving someone of future goods.
Yeah. Although I suppose you could tie that in, any arguments against antinatalism could be seen as arguments against abortion as well.
Abortion, yeah. There is some crossover.
Because you say, well, you're pro-choice, we're pro-choice, but actually that is being denied the chance to live. And it's all well and good saying that, well, they would have a bad life. But again, you don't really know. I think there's certain situations where you do know. They could have some serious defects. Or
a child being born during the Ethiopian famine is something very different to a child being born poor in America.
Yeah. But then I suppose, again, that can be reflected into the antinatalist stance as well, couldn't it? You can say, well, you could be a local antinatalist.
Yeah.
But a global native. No, the other way around. You could be...
Yeah, I know what you mean. A Gnostic antinatalist and an agnostic antinatalist.
Interesting.
But that does kind of sort of tie into the license thing, because antinatalism could be an argument for something like that. But I don't think forcing antinatalism is quite the way to go for anything. I mean, I can understand why people might choose to be an antinatalist. I don't have kids, and we don't intend to have kids. But that's a personal choice.
That's a bit different from trying to enforce that
Forcing
choice
it,
onto
yeah.
others. Yeah.
And declaring anybody who has a child immoral.
Yeah, I think that's a same thing of someone. In fact, it was when we had Kirill on. He said, "Well, in this house, we've always been pro-life, but we respect everybody to be we're pro-choice. We let everybody have. We don't think that if we accidentally got pregnant, then we'd keep it. There'd be no way that we'd have an abortion, but we wouldn't prevent someone else to. That's our choice. That's our morals. That's our life." And you can sort of respect that sort of line of thinking. And I think that's one of the biggest issues with the whole pro-life, which is more pro-birth thing. There isn't that care there. It's telling people what they have to do. Because I believe this, you have to do it. And it's like,
And that's the whole point of secularism, is to have a society with multiple views, that each is respected, even if they don't get their wishes fulfilled at any particular moment in time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I can understand people making those arguments from a religious point of view, but even from that, it should be, well, we are Christians, so we will make sure that we respect our views, but we're not going to force them onto other people. If you come into our church, you have to respect our laws. It's like coming into my house, or going into your house, or going into someone else's house. There's particular rules that you might have to do. You might have to take your shoes off. You might not. Plenty of other things that might be. Some people allow smoking indoors. Some people say no, out the window. Some people say you have to go outside. It's just what you do. It's the general respect for that sort of society. We don't go, well, I smoke, so I'm going to smoke in your house. No, far from it.
Yeah.
So,
and that's one of the reasons why I argue that the changes that need to be done to overcome some of the problems that we discuss are like in the structure of the society itself, and that's what needs to be worked on.
Yeah, most definitely. Just catching up with the chat as well. So I'm just going to focus on the relevant ones, but I'll just say hello to Off the Chain Atheist. How you doing, buddy? Nice to see you here. So Godless Scummer says, of course, you can always take the Alan B. Stard's view that you're pro-abortion but against women's right to choose.
It's not B-Stard, it's Bustard.
What's that from? I recognise it.
The New Statesman, Rick Mail. Where he was mocking Thatcherism.
Yes. God, that's a callback. I don't think I've seen that for forever.
I watch it at least once a year.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. Rick Mail was one of the greatest comedians.
Yeah, taken too soon.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you clarify that a little bit later. Hello, Stin. Nice to see you here.
Steen.
It says Stin. Is that Steen?
I think so.
Because he used to spell it E-E-N, didn't he?
Yeah, but he's halfway to being Stalin now.
Steen, if it is you, hello. If it's not, hello anyway. Let us know if Stin is Steen. I get confused with all your different names. Three Vikings, Stin, Steen. I mean, God.
Also, I think he's calling us arrogant because he says the level of arrogance increases the likelihood of opining publicly online.
Yeah.
And we're here opining publicly online.
Yeah. Well, do you know what? I've been called worse than arrogant, and to be honest, it's probably true.
Okay, it's not Steen.
Oh, it's not Steen. Well, hello, Stin.
Hello, Stin.
Good to hear you here. As for whether you've missed much, we've discussed so far license to the license to breed. We think it's generally a bad idea, but understand the arguments for it. And it ties in to a number of different things about improving society, better birth control, especially men taking on the responsibility. Maybe we should actually do something to men at birth so that they can't procreate until they apply to procreate. They don't necessarily have to pass a test, although that is another option. It's just that they can say, no, I'm ready to have a kid, and have that reversed. And then we broached Brave New World because everybody's sterilized there and everybody's just grown in test tubes. And we've just had a bit of a conversation about antinatalism and how that ties into it, and been answering questions and replying to comments as we've gone along. So on the subject of one of the issues that we've mentioned with, obviously, children being given a forced vasectomy or something like that, so that they can't breed until this is undone, is the whole bodily autonomy thing. So, is that also an issue with things like designer babies?
That's a pretty good question. I suppose it could be because you're doing something to them without their consent, but you're doing it before they're actually a person. You're creating the person rather than sort of impeding on somebody's bodily autonomy.
So the genetic modification would have to be done at an early
enough. It would be embryonic, yeah.
Yeah. So in that regard, I suppose it's not as bad because we'd justify, at least part of a justification for being pro-choice would be along the same lines. They're not a person yet. It's not the only justification. I don't think it's the only thing that makes it permissible. But they don't have a body or a mind yet, so it gives them an unfair advantage, though, and it's going to be something that generally only the rich do, so it would only increase the wealth gap. So in that regard, we could say it was a negative thing.
That's one of the arguments, in that it would create an unjust society where only the rich have the advantages. Like, they already have the advantages of Ivy League schools, being able to send their kids to the best schools, make the best contacts. Now, if there was this process that they could do to make their children have the best athletes, then that they would have an advantage over those poorer kids who need something like a sports scholarship to get into university to begin with. It would be out of the reach to the poor, so the gap would widen. And have you seen Gattaca, the film Gattaca?
No.
That is about something similar to that, where those who aren't modified are looked upon as something deformed.
Right. Yeah. And obviously, you can even think about the boys sort of situation. It's taking that to an absurd level, but not so absurd, depending on what these genetic modifications allow people to do. And in that regard, you look at how throughout the boys and how most of these heroes treat the people. Yeah.
There's a real big issue of justice when it comes to designer babies. And you could say that you need a license. This kind of ties into the license thing as well. Well, if you can't afford to make sure your baby is the best baby it can be, you shouldn't be allowed to have a child. Which again, means that only the rich can have children.
Yeah.
I think designer babies are a great idea. Don't get me wrong.
But everyone should have them.
But only to a certain extent. Yeah, and only if it's available to everyone. Like, I mean, there's still some issues of ethics here, but if you knew your child was going to have cystic fibrosis and you could fix that, you know, you probably would want to, because you wouldn't want your child to have that suffering. I mean, are you then having the same child? There's whole questions of whether it's the same person. But
yeah. But it hasn't become a person yet, so...
yeah.
But would it have become
again,
the same
it would
person?
be
Yeah.
And are you actually changing that person, or are you just saving them suffering?
I mean, you can look at it from your own angle. I can look at it from me. I obviously don't have cystic fibrosis, but I suffer with asthma. So if I try and think about it there, how different would I be if I didn't have to always remember to have my inhaler, and I could do a cross country without collapsing and all of that?
Here's another one that would suit both of us. Imagine if you didn't have to go through life with ADHD.
Yeah. Huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
But then I mean, it's interesting. I mean, would that just make you think like everyone else? And would that destroy some form of creativity? Would it destroy the ability to think about things in ways that neurotypicals tend,
Yeah, and the world needs neurodivergence, because, I mean, look at Wittgenstein. Look at, God, sorry, I'm tired. The Enigma machine.
Yes.
The computer guy.
Yes. Turing? No.
Turing. Alan Turing.
It was Turing, wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So imagine if they fixed them in the womb. Would those people have provided those great advancements to society?
No. You don't know. I suppose that's the thing. You don't know. Is fixing a mental defect, if you will, actually going to prevent them from being their brilliant selves,
achieving what they achieved? Yeah.
It's hard to know.
And you could also take it to another extreme. What happens if, say, Islamic or Christian extremists kind of get their hands on the technology and think, well, being gay is wrong. And you could say there was a gay gene, and you could stop that happening. Would that be right?
Oh, I mean, the gut is saying no.
No, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. It's hard to think about it there. I mean, I suppose if it's something that's purely physical, and don't get me wrong, I know the brain's physical, but I mean, your child's going to be born with only one arm, or they're going to have trouble breathing, or they're going to have a curved spine, or something like that. I think something that's purely physical perhaps is acceptable, like sorting out that sort of ailment. But maybe you're right, and the brain shouldn't be touched, because you don't. I know people can overcoming hardship and things like that. There can be said for that building character,
soul building, yeah.
But realistically, if someone didn't have to suffer with cystic fibrosis or only having one arm or anything like that, I mean, there's plenty of other hardships in life that people are going to experience, so I don't think they need that one. But yeah, no, I think you're right. You shouldn't, unless someone was going to be, I don't know, if you could work out that they were going to be, say, a serial killer, then perhaps that change is a bit more acceptable, rather than just thinking, oh, well, they're not going to be neurotypical.
But then where would Netflix get 50% of its fucking programming?
They're just what ifs. What if we lived in a world where this wasn't a thing?
But yeah, there is some positive elements to something like designer babies. And it might also help overcome some of the problems that the antinatalists bring up.
Because it would reduce
but again,
the suffering.
Yeah. And again, you could maybe license that technology, but it should be available to everyone at some certain level. And it should never be used in such a way that it gains a certain sector of the population advantages that, just aren't available, because then one of the points of a society is to try and create as just of a society as possible.
Yeah. Yes. It's complicated, isn't it?
It is.
Just like to say hello to Louis, Kimo, and Opie, who have entered the chat in the last 20 minutes or so. How you doing? Opie, man, it's been ages since we've seen you. Really glad you can be here. Yeah, dude. I had a really, just to let you know, it was only about 15 minutes long, but I had a really, really, really crap house mix at the beginning because I didn't realise that my headphones and the speakers were so out of sync. I just couldn't get anything queued up. It was all sounding wrong. So yeah, that'll be cut out. But it does mean that I am going to be back to, when I've got time, having a quick mix beforehand. And maybe when you and I have time, we can try and do a swap over mix at some point. Although how we'd
international mix.
Yeah, an international mix. Although if the latency between my headphones and sending the signal from that through the computer to the speakers, I don't know how well we'd deal with the latency going through some form of TeamViewer connection would be. But it'd still be fun to give it a go. It might just be that I do 3 tunes and he goes, right, stop, and takes over. But yeah, we'll give it a go. We'll give it a go, won't we, Opie? He also says, there's plenty of sociopaths and psychopaths that are functioning people in society because their nurture upbringing facilitated them not to be serial killers. Exactly. No, I completely agree with you there. That's why I said if you could tell that they were definitely going to be a serial killer rather than them going to be a psychopath. So I was intentionally specific with my wording there. Yeah, I think in general the brain in this regard is something that should be left alone. Fixing physical ailments apart from the brain, I can definitely see physical enhancements only if everyone has access to them. Let's say that people were going on a space mission, or the gravitational pull was changing, and I don't know, we needed denser bone structure or something like that to be able to support ourselves. Then again, I can see benefit to that. I do hope one day we do become spacefaring people, and it would be good to engineer the people with
more resistance,
exactly, to that sort of thing. So I can definitely see some benefits to it. I'm not completely against it, but I think in a general society, only fixing the physical ailments.
Yeah, there's a lot of moral elements and justice elements, but I think at its heart, if we could achieve that kind of thing, it would be good for society and good for people.
Yeah.
Although then you got the slippery slope of ending up in a brave new world.
Yes, yeah. And to be honest, I mean, you can see the way society. You can imagine it going that way. You can actually imagine society going that way. I bet when Brave New World came out, people were like, "Oh, it would never be like that."
And yet here we are today. People worshipping companies, getting brandings on, like people have tattoos of Apple and Nike.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Stin says, using genetic analysis to determine behavior is like describing how gravity works at the quantum level. Is that property at that scale? No, but if you could. I mean, these are all hypotheticals.
It's just an easy breezy chat that we're having rather than anything serious.
Yeah. This is the first stream back since my sort of 3 weeks off after the wife had a C-section, and obviously having a child and having this discussion, and obviously bringing up something like we shouldn't have children and if we should edit children, it's sort of relevant to my life right now. So it's sort of all different things I think about, and yeah, it's just nice and easy more than anything else. But there are some things that we've discussed tonight that I think would be interesting to do a little bit more of a deep dive into. One especially that I mentioned I'd like to do an article on, but maybe it's worth doing a video or having a roundtable discussion with some of you in the future. Doesn't necessarily have to be recorded, can be just on Discord, or we can do it as a stream, is having that conversation about universal wage, and the effects that it could have, the benefits that it could bring, the fact that it puts a bit more power into employees and takes it away from employers, the fact that everybody has enough to survive without working, be relatively comfortable but not particularly affluent, and the fact that companies have to do what they can to keep you rather than just not caring because people are so desperate for jobs, and just building a generally happier society. And I would love to get into a conversation about that at a much deeper level.
Yeah, I love those kind of conversations too.
Yeah, I will say though, right now, I don't know enough. I think Martin would be a good one to bring in to something like that. He's quite big on his economics and I suppose the political philosophy and side of things. So he'd probably have some very, very strong thoughts on the topic. And yeah, open invite if that's something anyone has some knowledge about or just wants to discuss.
Brina said she'd be up for it.
Oh, did you? Yeah, Brina, awesome. Give us a few weeks. Let us get running again. That's the word. And getting back into doing a few streams and having general chats, and then we'll book something in. Also, because I'm out here, I can be a bit more flexible with times now, so the streams don't have to be as early. And I don't know about you, Dave, but you're not doing your course at the moment, so I don't know if you're also a bit more flexible.
Yeah, I'm more flexible, and because I'm in here now, couldn't do it during Wednesday and Thursday afternoons because Emma works from home during those days, but in the evening.
Awesome. So yeah, we'll have a chat. I mean, either contact us on Discord or Twitter, and we'll get a group chat going on one of those two, and we'll try and plan something out and think about some key points to discuss. But yeah, Stin's got a good point. Who does know enough? No one. No one knows enough.
I know a little bit. But then what does it mean to say somebody knows anything?
Kimo says, to misquote Neil Postman in Orwell's book, people are controlled by inflicting pain. In Huxley's, they are controlled by inflicting pleasure. And they're both systems. It's the whole carrot and stick. They are also in Huxley's controlled by conditioning.
Yeah, and in Orwell, there's the whole thing about how they control the kind of brutish side of the population with gambling and with beer, and so it's a sort of pleasure thing with that. But the main themes are control through pleasure and pain.
Yeah, they're pretty much the opposite spectrum, I guess.
I mean, fear is good for controlling the population, but eventually people end up fighting back. But if you just keep them drugged up and happy all the time, they're less likely to want to do anything.
That's true. Yeah, it's why some of the arguments that you used to hear about legalizing cannabis never made sense. I mean, don't get me wrong, I understand people can suffer a form of psychosis, but the fact that people would go on about everybody who has a joint gets violent and stuff like that, you're just like, really?
Well, I know I've slaughtered plenty of nachos.
Yeah. It's crazy that some of these things get taken to such dishonest levels. I mean, there's plenty of good arguments against these things, but always the popular arguments for anything, against anything, or for anything, always seem to be terrible. Like some of the arguments for cannabis. Oh yeah, it cures cancer. What?
No.
What? No, there's some research that needs to be done into the cannabinoids, and there's potentially some positive effects that could come out doing it that way. Great.
It helps with nausea with chemotherapy and things like that.
Yeah. There are certain places around the world as well where some people who get really, really bad morning sickness to the point where they can't eat and the medication doesn't work, they are given just like a tiny vape of it because it just sorts them out. It makes, it deals with the nausea and all that, and it's in such a minute amount it doesn't really have a negative effect on the baby, and even if it was, the negative effect isn't as bad as the mother not eating. So there isn't the it's not saying, oh yeah, it's a cure-all for morning sickness. It's in some extreme cases it can be beneficial. This is again, it's always these arguments that are blown out of proportion. It doesn't matter whether it's for or against; they're just ridiculous.
There's much better arguments for as well.
Why do we humans do this though?
Because we like to be in control of other people's happiness. Some people are made happier by controlling other people's happiness.
So under utilitarianism, should we let them? If it makes the other people happy too?
Yeah.
Stin says maybe we should put our bits together.
So we're starting an OnlyFans?
I never did the elbows and knees, man. I was just gonna try and get one of just like erotic types of look, and I can't see it in the light, but just the back of the knee. I figured there's enough people out there that pay for weird things that maybe I could make a little bit of extra money on the side by just the crevices. Rev has decided to communicate exclusively in memes. Oh dear. That'll be entertaining to watch. Is that just on Twitter or is that everywhere? Yeah, we've lost into the new atheists. Good point, Dave. Godless Scummer says, there's a lot of good arguments for legalizing weed and I'm generally in favour, but some of the pro-legalization side make ridiculous claims that don't help the cause. No, exactly. I'm pro-legalization as well. In fact, I think if all drugs were legalized and regulated, we'd be in a lot better situation. There'd be a lot more tax money coming into the country as well.
they'd be a lot safer. They'd be a lot purer. You'd know what strength you're getting. There's a lot of benefits, and there's a ton more good arguments for legalizing drugs or specifically weed if you wanted. But you're right. It's these extreme, wacky arguments that just don't help the cause. Opie, so many new atheists get so butthurt about the definition of atheism. Yes, I find it funny when you suggest that there is more than one definition. They tell you you're being prescriptive and it's only that. And you're like, do you not understand prescriptivism?
I know they get upset because I got blocked by 3 of them in one thread.
That was amazing, though. That was absolutely amazing.
One thread. One guy only made one post to me.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, there was that one guy in there that basically said your entire argument back to you, and you said, yes, this is what I'm saying, and then he went on and said, you don't know what you're talking about, and then blocked you.
Yeah, said I was making an uneducated argument.
Yeah.
When he was actually arguing against what the guy I was arguing against was saying, but directing it at me.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do lose their minds.
Oh dear. Oh, Stin's saying bits of knowledge, as if it's me with a dirty mind. But what is knowledge? What is knowledge, if not our bits?
Well, we're also British, so it's part of our kind of constitution to have to be double entendre.
God the Scum has come up and said he's recently heard a claim that marijuana can cure Crohn's disease, which is completely bollocks. Things like that don't help the cause of getting marijuana legalized. No, it's in line with it cures cancer. And so it can offer some relief, and maybe with some research there are certain bits that can be spliced out of it that can be shown to have a positive effect. But going on these curing bents, just, yeah, as you say, don't help the cause at all. Stin says, it may be a coincidence, but a friend of mine stopped smoking it for a job and his Crohn's flared up and he had to have even more bowel removed. Now, maybe it can help keep it in check. I don't know enough, so I'm literally spitballing here, but I can imagine that maybe it helps keep it calm. I mean, it is an inflammatory disease, and there are, what's the word? Anti-inflammatory properties that can be in marijuana. So it's not that it cures it; it's the fact that it can stop it getting worse. And I have seen things there that that people take it because they find it aids their Crohn's, but they're not saying that it cures it. It just sort of keeps it in check. It's a completely different kettle of fish. Rev says, putting stoners in jail has become a for-profit endeavor in the US. Yeah, it's crazy. I think things are incredibly strict over there. Although, then saying that, there are so many places where you've legalized it now as well. So it's... I find the entire legal system in America incredibly confusing, because you've got your sort of entire country's laws and then you've got state laws, and like sometimes they're in conflict, so something can be both legal and illegal in the same place. Like, so what do you do? And God the Scum says he has Crohn's and can testify that it doesn't work. Fair enough. But then, I mean, that could just be it doesn't work for you. It doesn't give you any relief. It could be that you're not having the right strain. Maybe you need more like a high CBD strain or something like that. Or maybe, as you say, it's a load of bollocks. Kimo says, in my Canadian province, I'm allowed to cultivate up to 4 pot plants in my home, but I'm not allowed to distill whiskey in my home. My government must really care about me. Well, I can see a bigger problem with actually distilling whiskey in your own home. Fumes, potential for flames, and all of that. I'd say it's probably more dangerous to distill whiskey than it is to cultivate pot, unless you go mega crazy with your setup and your lights and everything like that. I'm sure they mean for standard plants, not grown with serious hydroponics and feeding them cocaine in their water or but yeah. Yes, God the Scummer has also noticed that the in the definition of atheism argument, where all the new atheists call everyone prescriptivists whilst being prescriptivists themselves. It's true. I will say something about this. There's a line where people don't understand you going, yes, there's multiple definitions, but this is the one I prefer and I wish people would use, to others going, no, there's only this definition. Most people seem to hear those two statements as the same thing. And I don't know how to get around that when you're trying to explain to them. You know, you can clearly say you can use whatever definition you like. You can identify how you like. I can have a conversation with you about why I think this definition is better than that one. Oh, you're being prescriptive. No, I'm not being prescriptive. It's telling someone this is the definition that you have to use for this word. I'm not doing that. I might be saying, I think you should use this definition. And there is a little bit of weight there because, and I can explain issues with logic in this other definition. But again, that's still not the same as prescriptivism. And I don't know how to explain the difference to someone that just doesn't want to listen. So prison is a big business here. Yeah, I mean, Rev, how true is orange is the new black? Because that's pretty much my only real experience of the US prison system. And you've got your whole corporations owning your prisons and putting people to work making knickers and digging cement and creating produce and wrapping cheese and all of that sort of thing. That's crazy, but I suppose it could be done in a good way. You know, if it was done for charities or something like that, then there are people actually giving back to the community rather than giving to a corporation that's just going to make a ton of money out of it. Do you know any more about the prison systems over there, Dave?
Not really. Not that much. Just that they're bad. Privatized prison is bad.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I mean, to be honest, I think prison systems in general, at least the ones I'm aware of, apart from, is it Sweden or Switzerland? Sweden, I think it is.
Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, and places like that.
But generally over here and further west, they're to punish rather than to rehabilitate. And most people who go into prison end up worse than when they went in. And that keeps people going into the prisons. And obviously in the US, that's the desired effect, because then they've got their free or cheap, workforce that are getting paid less than slaves. It's basically slave labor they're throwing them into. And I mean, that's absolutely awful. Rehabilitation is the way prison should go. Here's an interesting one for you out there, right? Let's say we all agree prison should be about rehabilitation and giving someone a better start so that they don't commit another crime. Let's just say for a moment we all agree on that. Let's say if there was a way to detect if someone could not be rehabilitated at all, and they would carry on doing whatever it was that they came in doing. Now, it could be that they were a thief, it could be that they're a rapist, it could be that they're a murderer, anything. But whatever it is, they cannot be rehabilitated. Should they get the death penalty? Should they be locked up into some form of permanent psychiatric care and drugged up? Not necessarily a psych ward, because their problem may not be psychological in that regard, but that sort of thing. Or should you still just try and rehabilitate them, even though it will never work? What are your thoughts on that?
Drug them up. Just because drugs are good. No. I think if you know they can never be rehabilitated, then there should be some other kind of thing worked out for them. Like put them to good use, make them work, pay them a wage, obviously, but make that wage be something that supports their cost of being in prison. Don't make them do shit labor like go into a gas-filled mine to rescue workers or anything like that. Yeah. But yeah, they should at least be looked after, because chances are it's not particularly their fault that they're like that. It's genetic or environmental or something like that.
I mean, if determinism's true, then it's no one's fault for anything.
No. And if determinism is true, then chances are that most people can be rehabilitated with the right education.
Yeah. I suppose it depends how deep some of those neural pathways run and whether they can be rewritten. So, just seeing if anyone has answered that question. Rev says no death penalty ever.
I'll be back in 2 minutes.
Okay, cool, no worries. So no death penalty ever. So Rev, out of the other options that have come up, do you think that they should, even though they can't be rehabilitated under this hypothetical, should they be put to work, or should they be drugged up for the rest of their lives, or what? Godless Scummer says Norway probably has the most liberal penal system and has very good statistics when it comes to people not reoffending after release. Exactly, and I think they do a half decent job at rehabilitation, and that's what really needs to happen. But you can understand why for-profit prisons don't want that. Brina says
one thing I just thought. Oops, sorry.
No, go for it.
You could have prisoners who can't be rehabilitated doing things like books on tape, like Edmund Kemper does. He knows he can't be rehabilitated. He's never getting out, but he does things like that. So you could have prisoners doing something like that, and it could improve their education at the same time.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah. And yeah, I wonder if that long term, if they had enough time, could even rehabilitate them at some point in the future. I mean, in the hypothetical, it can't, but yeah, interesting. Brina says, under the pretense of being part of their treatment plan, when really it's slave labor. Oh yes, so that's the for-profit prisons. Yeah, it is slave labor. It's crazy, absolutely crazy. So, Goddess Scummer says, on the other hand, Norway has a maximum sentence of 21 years, and people can argue whether a guy like Anders Breivik should ever be released. Yeah, interesting. Rev answers the question now, saying, perhaps it's good enough to rehabilitate the worst offenders in a prison society setting. Okay, so with the people that can't be rehabilitated and then re-enter normal society, there would be a society of prisoners that are looked after and might have, their own sort of working system. There is a chance that they there might be like the violent outbreaks and things like that, but that's because they're ones that could never be rehabilitated, and all the ones that could have then gone back into the world.
We already have that. It's called Manchester and Liverpool.
Yeah, awesome. So, was there anything else you think that we needed to cover off tonight before we head off?
That sort of covers everything in kind of brief and gives some ideas. And if people want to kind of go out and look for themselves, gives them some starting points of some arguments.
Yeah, definitely. And
it was a fun discussion. Thank you.
It was. No, it's great to have you back and actually have one of these discussions again. Hopefully, you guys out there have been given something to think of. If any of you do want to have a chat about this in the future or ask any questions or anything, just let us know. If you think on this overnight and go, what about? Drop us a comment on YouTube or get us on Twitter or on our Discord channel or anything like that. We love these conversations. And maybe a good roundtable discussion for something in the future. And I'm very, very, very much looking forward to the conversation in a few weeks with Brina and co that we could be having. Awesome. So just a couple more messages. Oh wow. So Brina says, part of her message was messaging. She's my question earlier about are prisoners actually making knickers and whatnot. That's actually true, and some rehab facilities are doing that well. And then it said under the pretense of being part of their treatment plan, which was really slave labor. I mean, I think I got it from context, but that does make a hell of a lot more sense. So thank you for clarifying there, Brina. Awesome. Well, that's it for tonight then. Thank you everybody who has joined in the chat, and anyone who is watching the rerun or has watched us live, or anyone listening to the podcast. Now, I will say an apology to all the people who tend to only listen to the podcast versions. I'm really behind in producing those. So you're probably going to get this much, much later than everyone else. I do plan on getting back to it, but I've had a lot going on. Give me some time, and hopefully you'll get your podcast again. So you've been listening to or watching the Fresh Air Sci-Fi show, and I'm Joe.
And I'm Dave.
Have yourself a good night.
Good night, all, and thank you for joining us. It was really good, really good.